The floor is yours, Michael.
Oh, okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Mike Sangiacomo, and you are in the We Love Cleveland room here. So we're going to be talking to some people who are from the Cleveland area and talking to them about what they do, what they have done, and how Cleveland has shaped their perceptions, how Cleveland figures into who they are and what they do. I'm going to give a brief introduction to everybody here and then turn it over to them individually so they can chat some more. There will be a chance to do a Q&A here toward the end. So first we have Gary Dumm. Gary Dumm is a longtime Clevelander who got into comics at an early age. He loves collaborating on projects with other artists such as Harvey Pekar of American Splendor fame. He's also worked with Scott MacGregor on Dip stories, and their most recent graphic novel from Vagabond Comic Arts called Fire on the Water. He and his wife, who's a longtime colorist, Laura, worked on a series of large-scale environmental monster paintings currently on view both physically and virtually at CSU's gallery. So that's Gary. Next we have Scott McGregor, who's lived in Lakewood and Cleveland his whole life. He worked in Cleveland's medical industry for 45 years while maintaining a working interest in comics and photography. After meeting Gary Dumm and Greg Budget in the mid-'70s, he was introduced early on to the work of Harvey Pekar. Inspired by Pekar's Off the Streets in Cleveland style, he created his own one-shot comic with Budget, Dumm, and other artists called DIP Stories. Over the following decades, he continued to collaborate with Dumm and Budget on comic strip proposals and full comic stories for local publications. He's an award-winning photographer of Ireland, and one of his photographs is in the permanent collection of the Cleveland Museum of Art. All right, welcome, Scott.
Thank you.
All right, Brad Ricca. Oh boy, Brad Ricca. I know Brad personally because he and I both taught a comic book history program at Case Western Reserve University. It was wonderful when we did it together, and then finally Case figured out that they could make more money if they split us apart. But it was a highlight of my life. Brad is the author of the definitive biography on Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster and Superman. It's called Superboys. Somewhere in between all that, he had time to get married, have kids, and write two other novels, Olive the Lionheart and Mrs. Sherlock Holmes. And by now he's probably written two more. Sequoia Bostick is a comic artist and illustrator who lives in Cleveland. She's a co-creator of Vagabond Comics, an all-ages, independently published comics anthology based out of Cleveland. She's a resident teaching artist, working with local youth to grow their visual art skills, all while growing her own artistic practice as a multidisciplinary freelancer. And I think that's everyone. Did I miss anyone? I hope not. Good. Okay, why don't we throw it over to Gary? Gary, why don't you tell us what you've got going and what's coming up in your life that we can all look forward to?
1 second, just from your moderator. So that I can share screen with Gary, we either have to turn off closed captioning or Clarence. If you click leave, you'll still be able to listen, but you won't be taking up the 9th spot. Does that make sense? There we go. All right. So are you ready for me to pull the screen up?
Why, sure.
Okay. Let me do that. All right. Does it look good to you? I can't see how it looks.
Looks fine to me.
Unfortunately, it looks like me, so yeah, it's good. So I'm Gary Dumm. Happy to be here. I've watched a couple of other of the presentations, and I've actually learned things. So for whomever is out there watching this stuff, I hope you'll get a little more, because this is indeed the Cleveland connection. We're We're just trying to do things to help you guys maybe be slightly inspired by what has gone before and what is going on now in terms of Cleveland comics and Cleveland art. I had a long period of apprenticeship with Harvey Picar on his autobiographical comic, American Splendor, and I learned a lot doing that. But the fact that I was able to do it in Cleveland was the most amazing part. Nowadays, you can be any place and do anything you want in terms of online comics, in terms of GoFundMe projects. You didn't have to do what Harvey did, which was every year bring out an issue of American Splendor, print 10,000 of them, hoping to break even, and then, as I did at times, help him carry multiple boxes of physical comics down his basement to store them until somebody might actually want to buy them. There's an American Splendor right now, the first issue, which is now, for crying out loud, 45 years ago. Time flies when you're having fun. More projects arose from that, including, well, here's some more stuff with Harvey. You can't read it, but you can get the idea. Harvey liked to write too much into most of his comics. That's not a dissing of Harvey. It just means my pictures had to be smaller. So from that point on, I did, as was mentioned, worked with Greg Budget, worked with Joe Zabel on American Splendor, and worked on Tip Stories with Scott McGregor, and continued doing many other projects, graphic novels, things like that. But I still have the same love at my age that I had when I was 10 years old and wanted to draw comics. So for any of you youngsters who love comics, my best suggestion is persist. Keep on doing what you love. But the thing that you have to do is try to carve out a space and time every day so that you practice it. Because until you get your 10,000 hours in so that you can call yourself a cartoonist, artist, craftsperson, you ain't there yet. You may find success early, you may not. That's not important. What's important is doing what you love, keeping at it. You will be, and also, of course, getting it out there. Instagram, Facebook, actual galleries would work for me. What's bothering my friends? Currently, my wife and I have a show of our collaborative paintings at CSU's gallery, which can be viewed either virtually or physically. So I would say, have fun, do what you're doing. If there's something in the water in Cleveland that makes people make comics.
Okay, thank you. I guess since we're on this train, we might as well go right over to Scott McGregor, who's worked with you. Scott?
Yeah,
take over.
I'm a writer, really. I always feel a little less because I'm not an illustrator, although I used to, like Harvey did, actually. Harvey used to draw these little stick figures and cram his dialogue in, and then give it to Gary and Greg and whoever. And I did the same thing. I think I drew a little bit better than Harvey did, but nonetheless, I'm not an illustrator. So I started writing stories about my Catholic school trauma. I think those were my first stories. They were called the Fighting Nuns, and it was about some pugilistic nuns that I used to have back at St. Clement's. And that started it. And then I realized that I could branch out and kind of use my imagination and write longer form stories. And then I got married, then I had kids, and I kind of took a long break from it. And after a while, I was just going out of my mind because I would have countless ideas for new stories. And so I started getting back into it in the 90s. And long story short, it led up to the day that I decided to do a graphic novel. Gary kind of inspired me by trying to apply for a grant to the Cuyahoga Arts and Culture. And fortunately, I scored it with my manuscript that became Fire on the Water. And Gary and I labored long and hard in that book. Gary spent 3-4 years of his life getting that thing illustrated, including, in the middle of his human drama of illness, but he got it done, and we're very proud of it, I would say. And it's been getting good reviews, not as many reviews as I like. Mike, now that I get to meet you for the first time, thank you so much. You were the first one to review it when it was an indie publication. It was called Tunnel to Hell. And
right.
Tunnel to Hell did so well that it, not necessarily in sales, but critically, that it ended up somehow, to this day I don't know how, on the Boston Globe's Best of 2017 list. And
wow.
By this time, our agent and everybody gave up on us. So I took it back to the agent and said, look, it's on the best, of 2017 list for the Boston Globe. So he took it back, and fortunately, Abrams spent some time with it and really liked it. And they printed it without one edit, really. They printed it whole, which was a real surprise. And again, another reason why we're real proud of that book. So, I'm an old Cleveland guy. I've been here all my life, and came from my heritage is Irish. My great grandparents were from Ireland, and so a lot of that kind of creeped into the Fire on the Water story, because the building of the Cleveland water tunnels was primarily accomplished with immigrant labor, and these people were subjected to the worst working conditions on earth, and many of them died building tunnels under the lake to bring us the clean water that we drink today. When you turn on your faucet, you're getting the water that these guys brought to us, to the filtration plants. So, and now I'm working on another story, which I hope to turn into a graphic novel somewhere down the road. And, life is good.
Very good. And don't apologize for not being an artist, including myself and Brad. We're both writers, and we rely on artists to try to bring our stuff to life, which can be difficult.
Yeah, I don't have enough confidence in my prose to write it all out. So the fact that you can kind of get away with illustrating what you're trying to say is a great thing.
Oh, yes. Brad, while we're on the subject, let's go over to you, buddy. What do you want to tell the folks?
I'm going to turn my microphone off. I'm still, full of hallelujahs and amens for Pastor Gary's amazing sermon today. I wish every, and yours was great too, Scott. Your book was awesome. I realized, in normal circumstances, I would have been able to come see you guys at a local con or something. So I was just thinking, I saw Gary. I wish every kind of student or someone, if you're starting to be an artist and or a writer, just listen to what Gary said, because it is so spot on. I'm going to come at it from a different way. I started, like Scott, like everybody, Clevelander my whole life, and my dad sold windows. He had his own company in the city, and he would drive around, take me and my brother around on Saturdays. We lived on the west side, the really clean suburbs of Westlake, Ohio, and he would take us into Cleveland, and it would look like Krypton. You know, it's half of it's bombed out, and you can't get in anywhere. And and he would tell us all these tales of old Cleveland, and which we didn't know if any of it was true. And one of it was, you know, that Superman, the guys who created Superman, came from Cleveland. And I was into comics and all that. And I said, no way, absolutely no way. This had to be kind of a fishtail because, you know, I like Superman. I love Cleveland, don't get me wrong, but there's no way it happened in Cleveland. And for some reason that just stuck with me forever and ever. And then I found out, well, he wasn't lying. You know, and he didn't lie about any of the other stuff either. But there were two guys, Jerry Siegel, Joe Shuster, in the 30s, came up with Superman. And that just seemed to me an amazing thing because for some reason, I mean, I was a kid, but it was like, that seems like something that someone in New York would do, right? Or now you'd say, well, that's some kind of Brooklyn artist would do that. Because they're way cooler. No, it was these two, and I just couldn't get over it because I wanted to know how they did it. And that got me started writing this book, and it took like 10 years. You know, not like constantly 10 years, because that would be pretty sad, but a long time. And because I wanted to know how they did it. It to me, it was like Frankenstein's monster. You know, what's the secret of life for the first superhero? Really, the first superhero. And I found out that it was like Frankenstein's monster. That they took all these parts from their lives as teenagers growing up in Cleveland. They were two like really skinny, prototypical nerds. They liked science fiction. They liked all this weird stuff. And they just pulled all these pieces together and created this insane thing that's Superman. I mean, you look at it for the first time and he makes no sense. You know, he's wearing the underwear on the outside. He's got the hair. And why is he wearing a cape? But somehow it works. And somehow it was so perfect and still is perfect, I think. But, you know, they came up with it using the stuff around them. And the best part of it to me, the best part of the story, and it's a long story, the part that makes it a Cleveland story for me is that, you know, it takes them, they don't just do this automatically. It takes them 7 years at least to come up with this. And it starts even before that. Everyone tells them this is a bad idea. They have no training. They just, you know, they're high school graduates, couple art classes for Joe Shuster, the artist, but that's about it. Their parents say, stop doing this, go into a nice profession. Their friends think they're crazy. And when they start sending it out to publishers, they all send it back because they say, this is too crazy, this is too insane. Nobody can jump around, and why is he wearing the cape and he's punching everybody? Nobody's going to read that, right? But the best part, the Cleveland part, is that they don't care, to me, is they still keep going. Just like Gary said, they persist. That everyone is telling them no, and they do it anyway. Partially, I think, because they're young, you know, but because they're Clevelanders. They have this work ethic that kind of never ends and never quits. And they just keep going because they know that they have something. They don't know what, but they know it's theirs, and they know it's good somewhere. And they just keep going, even when everyone else tells them you should quit. I mean, every Browns fan knows this, right? Oh, maybe next year, you know, and finally it hits for them. And that's it. I mean, they're legends of all time for creating Superman. All the other stuff aside, you create the first superhero in comics, that's legend status. So that's like kind of where I come at it. You know, that story just always fascinated me, and I still find it really inspirational that when people tell you no, go ahead and do it. You know, not in terms of breaking the law and that kind of stuff, but I don't want to send the wrong message, but in terms of art, in terms of creation, writing reading, drawing. Keep at it, and you can make something really cool.
There we go.
Cool.
And I should say that Brad and I are founding members of the Siegel and Schuster Society, dedicated to keeping the ideas of Joe and Jerry alive and talk about Superman, which we do. We haven't been able to meet in quite a while, but we will be getting together soon and see what else we can do. Sequoia, are you there?
Oh, yeah.
Would you like to tell us a little bit about
Yeah.
yourself?
So, my name is Sequoia, and I'm actually a non-native Clevelander. I'm originally from Tennessee. Started in Memphis and then lived in Nashville my age life. I can say, like, as someone who's not from here, I fell in love with this city as soon as I got here, even after I heard so many, I would say, questionable things about it. Whenever I tell someone that I told someone that I was coming here for school, like, I would always get the wide eye, like, why? But, you know, Cleveland has a reputation, and I think it's literally just built on hearsay and not on actual, like, visiting and stuff like that. But I moved here in 2010 to go to the Cleveland Institute of Art, where I actually ended up studying under Brad Ricca, I think the last 2 years of school. So like 2013, 2014. So yeah, like I fell in love with comics right then and there. And I was always a comic book reader, even if I kind of dipped around in like manga and stuff like that. But I really didn't know about like the anything outside of like superhero comics. So when I met Brad and started like going over like different kinds of comics, I found out that there was like an entire industry of like underground comics or indie comics, you know, independent publishers. And I don't think I would have ever come across that unless I moved here to Cleveland. And I love that Cleveland just has such a like rich art history, and as well as like a nice, cool, like underground, like art world. And I was able to actually get into comics more. And then I started my own anthology called Vagabond Comics. So we started that because of Brad Ricca's class, which I'm proud to say, and I always bring it up whenever we're at schools or talking to people. But it's just like a way to connect people through comics, connect people through art, and tell stories. And it doesn't really matter what the story is. It's just like, you know, creating work. But yeah, that's pretty much it for me.
Okay, great. Like you, I'm not originally a Clevelander also. I grew up in Philadelphia where we used to make Cleveland jokes all the time. Sorry about that, you guys.
Yeah.
And then one day I was looking for a job and they offered me one in Cleveland to work at the Plain Dealer. I've been a reader all my life of comics since I can't remember a time when I wasn't reading comics as a child. I was always thrilled by the fact that Jerry and Joe were created in Cleveland. And that was one of the smaller reasons that I came here.
Mm-hmm.
After I was here just a couple of years, I was able to convince the editor at the Plain Dealer to let me do a syndicated comic book column. And it went all over the country from about 1992 to, I guess, right up until I left in 2019 when I retired after 30 years at the Plain Dealer. So it's been a lot of fun. I've been writing and teaching, and somewhere along the way, the publisher of Marvel Comics asked me, why aren't you writing comics? And I said, well, you know, I would love to, but I didn't think I was able. I thought it was too difficult a nut to crack. But anyway, using the teach what you know or do what you know idea, I created a series called Phantom Jack about a newspaper reporter who could turn invisible. And believe it or not, much of the stuff in that comic was actually true to life, except the invisibility part. Since then, I've done a few other books, Tales of the Starlight Drive-In, a sequel to Phantom Jack in which he dies, which I could just digress a little bit here. I remember writing that script of Jack's death, and I wrote it, and I walked in to go to bed, and I told my wife, well, it's over, Jack's dead. And she looked at me like I was crazy. And she said, you realize that you don't have to kill him. You could bring him back anytime you want. And I said, no, 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 no. The story dictates Jack's got to die. And Jack did. Cleveland has played a big part in comic books, in my comic books anyway. My latest unpublished book that I've self-published, and I'm going to get around to publishing one of these days, is called Chalk. And it's a very simple concept about a chalk outline drawn around the body of a dead man that comes to life. And this chalk outline avenges the dead man who happens to be a priest. And that literally came from one night I was covering a murder not far from where Jerry and Joe lived. It was around 1 a.m. And I went to, after the police were there, and I was looking at everything, looking at the blood on the street as I removed the body. And I phoned in my story, and then I went to start my car, and it wouldn't start. Everybody else was gone. It was like 3 o'clock in the morning, and I'm sitting there in my car in this bright moonlight, just waiting for AAA to come rescue me. And that's when I stared at this blood on the street, and that's where Chalk came to me. Just basically, it literally came to life right there. So yeah, you can use a lot of your own experiences in your work, and it comes through as being very sincere. So that's my story. So I wanted to talk to you guys now about how Cleveland has shaped your perceptions. Cleveland has things like the underground water story. That's amazing. That's something unique to Cleveland. Other cities have things like Philadelphia has its cheesesteaks, which have been in many of my stories. So what else? You writers, artists, how else has Cleveland been featured as a character almost in your work? Who would like to say? Who would like to talk about that?
Well, I do like a lot of autobio kind of stories, and I would say like with my newest stuff, of course, has always featured Cleveland. I just love featuring the people that I come across every day. Like there's a lot of surprisingly just off the street, like famous, everyone knows this person, people here in Cleveland. And I know there's even whole books based off of it, The Faces of Cleveland, where I know some of you are even in there. But yeah, so it's just really fun being able to just come across a bunch of cool, like interesting characters and be able to put them in your story and then share that connection because everyone knows those people.
Interesting. That actually leads me to another question I was going to ask about how do you guys feel about using real people in your comics? I always joke that I've been a character in more books than I've actually written. Bendis has used me many times and killed me twice. And that includes real politicians and real countries and real situations. Bendis used to use characters off Fox News, local Fox stations, use their likenesses and use their real names. And I remember I ran into one who I told about that, and I say, hey, what do you think about that? He was not happy. So how do you guys feel about using real people and real events in your work?
Harvey in American Splendor had no problem with using real people. But as Sequoia said, I think the joy for him was in some ways he was repaying a debt. If they'd done something good for him, he said, oh, cool, I'll put you in my book. And then I would end up being sent photographs with Harvey ordering me, put him in this story somewhere. I have no problem with that. I also have no problem because I also do political cartoons. So I put real people in them. And the last 4 years have been really fertile ground for political cartoons.
Right. Have any of you ever been confronted by a person who was very angry about being in your book, who didn't expect to be in your book?
Not yet.
Not yet.
In Fire and
had,
Water was a true story, but it had enough flights of fancy and imagination in it that I decided to change the names to protect whatever, even though most of the people in it were dead. I think my worry was that their descendants would come after me.
Sure.
Yeah.
I'm sure that happened.
In the case of Garrett Morgan, who was one of the real people, I had, elected to change his name, even though I was blatant about who it really was, for the sake, because I was inventing dialogue, I was inventing situations that weren't, I wasn't there, so I had to make it up in a way. So I didn't want to get sued. It was enough money to make a graphic novel. I didn't feel like hiring a lawyer to navigate those waters. So, but I've had some criticism from it. From different people looking at it saying that, why didn't you use the real names?
I can understand that. Yeah. I had that question actually.
So that's why it was just timidity, in terms of pushing the envelope. I felt that I could still tell the story and not necessarily, hint their real names. But in our book, to be honest with you, at the end of the book, there is a 10-page dissertation about the real events, the real people. So I feel like we did get that in there,
Yeah. I was at San Diego Comic-Con just as Tales of the Starlight Drive-In came out, my graphic novel. And a director of pornographic movies came over and said he was going to sue me because one of the titles of the movies that was playing was his movie. And I just kind of looked at him and said, hey, knock yourself out. What can I say? Image Comics can handle it. Let me ask you something else about comics. What I don't like is on Facebook and places like that when we comic geeks start talking about TV shows and movies and comics, and we get passionate about it. We say like, Batman would not say that, and Superman would not do this, and the detractors will say, "Oh, idiot! It's all make believe," which I really hate, because when I read a comic or watch a movie or a TV show, I throw myself into it, and I want to believe that this person exists, even in my mind, just to say that. If you're going to sit there and look and read a comic and say, well, this is all junk because none of this happens, then you shouldn't even bother reading it. And that leads me to this question that I have. Are there any scenes in any comic books, we'll leave it in comics for now, that always chokes you up, that affects you emotionally? I have a couple, but I'll throw it out to you guys first. Is there a scene that no matter how many times you read a book, you read that scene, that comic book, and it just kind of goes, get you right here. Anybody? I'm not the only one.
Nerd.
The first one that comes to mind, takes me back to when I was a kid, and that is the repeated episodes in Uncle Scrooge comics, where Uncle Scrooge is diving in and out his money bin.
Okay.
I'm sure this is part of the foundation of why I become such a successful capitalist.
Gotcha. Anybody else? Scene that always chokes you up or makes you happy?
When I was in high school, an underground comic book came out called Binky Brown Meets the Holy Virgin Mary by Justin Green. And when I opened it up, the very first page, Binky Brown accidentally knocks over his mother's statue of the Virgin. And of course, after 9 years of Catholic indoctrination and wanting to release all the anger I had over it, I thought, wow, this gave me an idea. And then I think that idea eventually down the road led to the Fighting Nun things.
Okay.
So I would say Binky Brown Meets the Holy Virgin Mary was my first recollection.
So Scott, when you say that seeing those nuns choked you up. Do you mean literally?
No, I mean literally. Yeah, they used to like
Hey,
grab your
I've
face
been
like
there.
this and kind of stretch it out for you. Among other things. We had a rather brutal order of nuns at the school I went to. They really were punchers and kickers and drag you by your
Yes.
hair and stuff like that.
Wow.
People don't believe those stories. They're amazing. My stories of nuns. They locked me up because I was bad. They locked me up in a room in the convent and literally forgot about me. I was there till my parents came 9 o'clock at night, and the nun said, "Oh my God, he's still downstairs." That has become a novel that I've yet to write. I mean, I've written it, but I yet to get illustrated. Called Stations of the Cross.
Wow.
Mine. There have been many, but the one that always gets me is one of the greatest comics ever written, called "Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow" by Alan Moore, and it's a look at the life and death of Superman. And it was done at a time when they were going through the crisis of Infinite Earths, and Superman was going to be changed. So they said, "Go nuts" to Alan Moore and write the last Superman story. And in it, there's a scene where Crypto and Lena Lang are fighting off the bad guys, the villains. And they know that these villains are going to kill them because they're so much more powerful. And there's a scene where, and Brad knows where I'm going, where Crypto, the super dog, is like fighting Kryptonite Man. And the guy says, you're you stupid dog, I'm killing you. And the dog just kills the Kryptonite Man and then woos in pain and dies. I read that in class because I used to teach that book in our class at Case, and I would actually choke up. And the students, I think, get a giggle out of that because he's so passionate about that dog.
No, but that goes back to kind of like that's it. I knew you were going to say that the minute you started this thing. But that goes back to like the whole thing because you're, for those that don't know, you're a huge dog guy. Huge. And
yes, I am.
It's kind of what you bring to the comics, you can take they're speaking directly to you, not just crypto fans,
right?
Of which there are, more than a couple. But yeah, that's kind of the comics can do that, I think, better than I don't want to say everything because somebody will, type in the comments, well, what about the Pieta or, but they really have the power of speaking to you on an individual level, right?
Yes. They really do. They really do. So anybody else want to chime in? Anything more? I don't know.
I actually just finished reading this book this week. It was called The Heart Tomorrow. And there's a scene in there where a guy fires a gun in the air because he didn't want to actually shoot it at the target or whatever. And It was this dude that was kind of like a jerk and was talking about how like guns are like the best. And he starts cleaning his glasses and he looks up in the air and the bullet came back down and like hit him like square in the eye. And it was just such a shocking.
What's the name of that again?
The Heart Tomorrow.
Hold it back up. I can't. You're too close. Okay.
Yeah.
The Heart Tomorrow.
Yeah.
Cool.
So it is. Yeah. And like that scene was just so shocking. And it wasn't, and like, you can see the whole page, like when you're reading it, but it's still like, I don't know, it's amazing. And like, I can hold up the drawings. The drawings are so simple that it like, it just happened. And it was just like, I remember just like having like a surprise look on my face for like 5 minutes afterwards. And then I like ran and showed my roommate, and my roommate's like, holy crap, did you see that? Like, how does that happen? But I guess it does.
That's great. That's really great. Cynthia, how much time do we have, or are we already over time?
You're good. You have 10 more minutes. You have 10 more minutes if you want to talk a little bit more. There might be some people in the audience with some questions. I was going to ask the audience what comics get them where they live, because I'm always looking for another list too. So this would be a good time to come on stage if you want to, and if you request, I'll let you on, and I'll leave and get out of the way.
That would be great. That would be great. While we're waiting for them to come, I could mention that, getting back to the original point of all this, Cleveland and the Cleveland area is an incredible breeding ground for comic writers and artists. I mean, we've got, and I've termed this, people try to steal this term from me, the three bold Bryans of Cleveland: Brian Azzarello, Brian Vaughn, and Brian Bendis. All three, all Bryans, all bold. We have, of course, Durf, we have Harvey, we have Pete Craig Russell, who's an amazing artist down in Kent. Chip and Art Sansom, who do the Bored Loser comic strip. Mike Gustovich, who did tons of your favorite books from the 80s and 90s. Tom Baddock, who does Funky Waker Bing every week. And I could go on and on. There are just so many people who come from this area who just are huge successes. Do we have any folks in there who have questions out in the audience?
Yep, we have Matt here who just joined. Matt, do you have a question or something to share?
Oh, I just want to say thank you so much for all these Cleveland stories. I'm like literally at Coventry and just hearing the stories from last night and today. I mean, it's so cool to hear locations and people and tying back to like the history of labor in Cleveland. And oh my gosh, that was really cool. I'm gonna buy the Fire and the Water book after this. Some of the really intense comics, I think, especially like a lot of the auto bio stuff, I saw Blankets mentioned, but like when it's auto bio, like for example, Spinning by Tilly Walden, and they go through like personal trauma, and it's trauma that they don't usually, like they haven't mentioned before. Like some of those big reveals are like very powerful when we can have those silent panels and like Sequoia said, like the gunshot and things like that. And I don't know, I think that's a really great form, especially for like youth watching this, like to experience that, like this happened to me and I'm not just going to write about it, I'm going to show like the facial expression and talk about like empathy, and like we draw the faces that we are or we show the faces that we are drawing sometimes on our own faces, and so that's just really powerful. So that was something.
A lot of connection there.
Yeah.
We were talking before about what advice we would give would-be writers and artists, and I'll just say something that I believe firmly. Keep, every time you get an idea, don't assume you are going to remember that idea. Trust me, when you get older, like some of us are, you don't remember anything. So I write everything down like a grain of an idea. I'll write it down, and you'd be surprised about how you can use that later on, how it will turn into something. Likewise, I found my little notebooks from when I was in grade school, when I used to write short stories. And some of them, there was some little things in there that were actually useful. Some I realized I completely stolen from Twilight Zone, but hey, I was 8, what did I know? So write down, keep a notebook and write down these little ideas, and you'd be surprised. Someday you will perhaps use them.
Mike, remember, steal the good stuff.
There you go. Right.
And make it your own. Put it through your filter. Let's steal the good stuff.
That's right. Just change it a little bit.
Kelly, I saw that you were on here. Would you like to hop back on if you had a comment or a question? We'll let you back onto the floor. But if not, that's okay too. We'll let Mike and the panelists keep going.
I had a comment.
Oh, right.
I might have put it in chat, but one of the things that I really love is when I see myself in a comic. So I just want to mention that Sequoia is on another panel at 3 that I'm really excited about, called Comics Represent. It's about including all of the different voices and experiences in the comics world. So you guys might want to come and lurk and listen to that one too. Because that, I think, was the way in for me. I didn't read a lot of comic books when I was a kid. My mother probably thought they were too low class or something. And So when I found graphic novels, that was a really big deal for me. Now I just need a really big magnifying glass so I can keep reading them, because it's getting harder and harder to read the print.
Yeah, I saw
I
that
also think, I gotta tell you, I also think that learning how comics work as a writer, not a writer who ever gets her work done, but that I learned a lot about writing other stuff from learning how comics work and from reading about how comics work. So anyone listening who's not sure if they do comics but might want to, you can learn so much about how to make sure your writing moves just by learning how the comic book works.
Well, comic scripts are actually very, very similar to movie scripts and TV show scripts. I mean, a professor at Villanova University came up to me and said he used my scripts that I included in Phantom Jack as examples of how to write a movie script, which shocked me. I said, oh, cool. So, I mean, there's a close correlation there. And you see that all the time now with all the TV shows and movies based on comics. They're definitely all really joined in there. And I think we're finally getting to a point where TV shows and movies are almost getting it right. They're almost getting the comics right. Still a ways to go.
One nugget from a repeater that I enjoy repeating is, when I quote, "With words and pictures, you can do anything."
Right. Yep, I agree. It's very true.
I see we have a question here in chat from, where do young cartoonists get involved with the waters of indie comics in Cleveland and beyond, Pittsburgh, Columbus, etc.? Lake Erie Inc. and this event is a great start. Good question.
I'll throw it open to any of you guys. You're better at this than I am.
Well, I was gonna say, yeah, like normally there would be comic book shows happening around this time, or at least started, of course, with Lake Erie Inc., which is always the first one for me of the year. So when that does start happening again, I would say start going to these shows. Like there are a lot of yes, mainstream like comic book shows, but of course there's also a lot of like indie shows as well. Here in Cleveland, I think there are at least like 3 of them that happen throughout the year, including Genghis Khan, which is the last show of the year. And yeah, and it's not just here in Cleveland, it's pretty much all over the United States. You can find like indie comic book shows to go to. And also just like exploring the internet. Like I know like social media is getting a little out of hand these days, but like Instagram and like Twitter are good places to find comic artists and seeing what they're working on and stuff like that. And yeah, Cynthia mentioned Vagabond Comics. Yes, like my anthology specifically is an anthology that's open to everyone. And we're all ages as well. So you can also be like, I think the youngest person to submit was a 9-year-old, and his comic was hilarious. It was about pizza. So yeah, like looking for like communities where you can share your work and to collaborate. I know even Matt even has like a drawing circle that he started recently. And so, yeah, there's tons of places you can check out.
Good. Yeah, comic conventions are great places. My favorite is always C2E2 in Chicago, usually held in April. That seems to be one of my favorite ones. I mean, Wizard is basically just a show place for TV. There's not a lot of comic stuff going on at Wizard World. But other cons are really good. San Diego is a zoo. You can't really do anything there. You can meet some people, but it's so crazy. Are we about to add anything in there?
Cynthia just posted a fun comment that's San Diego Con announced they were the first virtual Comic Con, but actually we beat them to it. So
there we go.
And Clarence is interested in the local groups. Clarence also, I think, has a group. Don't you have a group that's like Speed Sketchers? But and Matt has a group. So you guys should just take a minute and network here. Plus, come to the over 18 after party after Allison Bechdel speaks tonight. And I'll turn on the networking too, because I know that I think Comic-Con actually has helped bring some artists together in ways that have kind of helped them promote their work. I feel like I saw more of our Comic-Con guests in the Cleveland Scenes Comics issue a year or so afterwards, one year when John G was at Comic-Con and then he was curating that. So, you know, come to the after party and do some more networking. You can also do that in the green room. Yeah. And Matt Haberbush is shamelessly plugging Comics in the Circle info, which I want to do even though I don't draw, but I like to tell the stories. So, you know.
Is that going to happen this year?
I'm currently like running Genghis Khan, and as of right now, we are not entirely sure if Genghis Khan will happen physically this year. Everything's still pretty up in the air for a lot of comic book shows, and they've already kind of started slowly making their way into like 2022 to have like a physical show. But I think like what we are we're this is still up in the air as well, but we are hoping that we can include some of our sponsors this year and have like kind of smaller things throughout the year to make up for the show not happening. And that's the plan so far.
Cool.
But Genghis Khan still exists.
That's my favorite show.
All right.
Genghis Khan.
Yeah.
Genghis Khan's awesome, and now that Sequoia's like running
That's a lot
it
of fun.
with some of her pals, I think it's going to be just unbelievable because that you see there's such a wide variety of local and then like kind of regional, and it's just so cool.
Matt came
A lot of
on. I
fun,
think he's
a lot
going to
of fun.
tell us more about his group.
I mean, I want to say Genghis Khan was the first place and the only place I've ever tabled, and Sequoia was one of the first people ever like published me through Vagabond. So like she's done so much for the current local comic scene, indie comic scene. But yeah, Comics in the Circle is something where it's like kind of like a drink and draw, except we don't drink and we don't go to bars, and it's located University Circle once we can be together again. But it's been on Zoom. We're trying to use Discord as well. But that was something that was inspired by Pittsburgh Comic Salon as well, and also inspired by Cleveland Game Devs, who are a local group. So these kind of like, there's local drink and draws too. So we're trying to get groups together so we can have those interactions. You know, where you can talk about people who met at on Coventry or whatever. So I know that's an option, and there are a lot of different venues. Like you can go to drink and draws too and meet cartoonists there. Like people do that, and sometimes it switches between different locations. So like go on Instagram, Facebook, look for like Cleveland Drink and Draw. You'll probably find their info too. But it's a lot of searching.
I know Blick
Facebook.
Arts and Crafts does their own drink and draw. I know the Rust Belt Monsters, they do their own drink and draws. And I know Carolyn John Comics has like a free comic book day where they actually invite artists to kind of come and sketch and do kind of fun stuff like that.
Usually you're on Free Comic Book Day, which we haven't had in the last couple of years, unfortunately.
Yeah, I'm wondering what they're going to do this year.
So
He'll figure out something.
I just want to mention at 1:30 we have another panel. It's Careers in Comics. It seems like most of the people who are going to the panels are other people on panels or workshops. Let's see, Brian Azzarello will be there. Nicole Boos, who used to edit for DC or Marvel or both, I forget which, but I didn't even think about comic editors until I met Nicole, so that was kind of interesting to me. Clarence is on that one, and I'm trying to remember who else is on that one, so I'll pull it up. Oh, Karen Sandstrom is on that one. She's great. Terry Liebenson is on that one. So yeah, that's coming up. I think I'm going to leave you guys here. You can chat as long as you want. Thanks so much for participating. Thanks to everyone who's been watching. Come back. Come to something else today if you can. And take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.
Yes.
Bye. Okay. And my dog did not bark once. I'm very impressed.
Very good. All right, I'm going to take off. I got to go teach now.
Yeah, that's
See you
here.
later.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot, guys. Good seeing you.
Bye-bye.
Take it easy.
See everybody. Good to see
Hey,
you.
Brad,
Gary.
we got to get together, or maybe we can do a Siegel Schuster meeting now. Now that have you gotten your shots yet,
I got one of them.
Brad?
It's gonna
Okay.
be another one.
We'll see when everybody gets their shots. Maybe we can actually
Yeah,
meet in
we can
person.
always do one of these, but
Yeah.
yeah, I agree.
All right.
All right.
Thanks a lot, you
Good to
guys.
see you. Congrats on your
I'll
book.
see you later.
again,
Nice to
guys.
meet you all.
Really liked it.
Thank you very
Hopefully
much.
I'll see you at a con
I look forward to it.
someday. Good to see you, Gary.
So long,
Okay.
Brad.
Your wife, I said hi.
See you, Gary.
Bye.
See you, Brian.
See you, Michael. Bye, Gary.
Take it easy, Scott. Really hope you get that problem resolved.
Yeah. All right. We'll see you
Take
later.
care.
Bye bye.